Welcome back to Spectrum Bay News 9. I'm Rick Elmhorst. It's time to go in depth. More than 300 homes and multiple businesses have been evacuated in the area around Piney Point. It's a former phosphate plant near Palmetto. Now, authorities have said they are making progress in draining a leaking wastewater pond, but they're urging residents to heed evacuation warnings. And joining me now to discuss the Piney Point situation is Tom Marchesello. He's the CEO of OriginClear of Clearwater. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having us. Appreciate it.
All right, Tom, you're an expert in environmental sciences and technology, and you have some experience in dealing with wastewater treatment. Tell us a little bit about your background first.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I currently am the Chief Operating Officer of OriginClear, and we're a wastewater treatment and clean water treatment company for industrial, municipal, and commercial clients. So we basically make machines that clean up water and make it available and clean for, municipalities and people. I actually have a background in environmental sciences in the former Air Force. Actually, I basically worked in Space Command, eyes in the sky, looking at all the science of the Earth, making sure things were working the way they should be. So I have a good 25 years of trying to keep our environment clean and sustainable.
So you and your company have, over the past year or two, have kind of done a look-see specifically at phosphate plants and Piney Point to see kind of what is going on there. Maybe if you could do some business to help them. What should people know about the situation at Piney Point?
Well, the Piney Point situation is obviously disappointing. This is kind of like a crisis that just happened that obviously has been happening for like 15 or 20 years. So, when the operator failed to, manage the site and went bankrupt, they allowed this site to kind of sit really not being managed. And they should not have really been allowing all this wastewater to just sit there. They could have been doing things like dewatering and moving some of this wastewater and treating it and moving it off site as opposed to sitting in a big pond. But that didn't happen, obviously. And so now you're dealing with the problem of, a collapse, which is really just so unfortunate.
All right, Tom, so folks who are not familiar with a situation like this at Piney Point, how does a gigantic amount of water get on the top of something called a gypsum stack?
Yeah, so there's two processes here. When the mining operations, which are taking place inland, are digging up the phosphate rock, at that location, what's happening is they're trucking it and or training it over to these processing plants, and the processing plants are making fertilizer. So the byproduct of it is this waste, this gypsum waste, right? So what they do is they pile it up, and they basically then put water on it as what's called a settling pond. And so over time, the water and the gypsum settle down so that the toxic stuff sinks to the bottom and leaves the clearer water at the top and oxygenates. It's a really old method of letting nature supposedly take care of the problem, but it doesn't take care of the problem because it still leaves toxic materials all over the place in these huge piles. And it's really just an old, poorly regulated industry that needs to be kind of modernized. They could be treating the stuff at the mining location instead of dealing with a waste product at a fertilizer processing plant.
And of course, that's something that your company would like to do. In a situation like this, where the water's already there on top of a gypsum stack, do you have to bring in new equipment? Can it actually be done at a site like that?
Yeah, so a site like this one, which is having problems, you can fix these too over time. You can do what's called dewatering. So what you do is you side stream out some of the water that's in this pond and you run it through a machine, you treat it and remove some of the toxins from it so that you separate the toxins from the water, and you can reuse the water and then release that safely, discharge it into the bay or into the ground. In this case, what you're dealing with is highly loaded water, and you're talking about water that's so on a magnitude scale of toxicity. It's so much more than like poop, for example. Like you're
Right.
used to like sewage spills and people get all upset dumping it into the bay. Well, this stuff is like 20 to 50 times more nutrient loaded than sewage, and it's
All right.
significantly bad.
All right, Tom Marchesello, thanks so much for joining us today on In Depth.